Okay, so if we can switch to the next slide here, Jess. As we're doing this, I just want to point out a couple of features here. Up at the top, there's a little quotation, little box. First of all, first the little one at the top is for chat. If you haven't found that yet, it's like a little conversation bubble. If you click on that, it'll open the chat window. So if you have any questions, you can just type them in there. If you have are having any technical problems, certainly type them in. We'll keep an eye on that. We'll keep it open so we can answer them. And then if they're mission related, we'll answer them towards the end. So it's the little box up here at the top, the one that's right here. So if you can see the red circle at the top, that's the little chat box. So click on it, that'll open your chat window. And then for most of you, we would ask that you remain muted unless we've opened it up for discussion. And it's only because of background noise. It's not that we don't want to hear you. It's just that I think we've all learned from doing more and more Zoom calls over the last 6 months. Things in the background can be really distracting. So we just invite everybody to keep their call on mute while we're doing this, and then at the end we'll certainly open it up for questions as well. So give everybody another minute or so to join us. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin then. Oh, let me open my notes now. You know, I have notes because I don't want to get this wrong. So I never trust my own memory all the way. So I want to begin by certainly introducing our presenters for today. I'm Elise Frederick. I'm the Executive Director of Mission Doctors. We have with us Jim and Terry Hakey, who served both in Zimbabwe and Cameroon. And thank you, Jim and Terry, for being with us. And we have Dr. Carol Hassenegger, who served in Cameroon. Thank you, Carol, for being with us. We thought that we would use this webinar, because this is our third one, to let you hear from some of the doctors who've served. We think that always seems to be what people enjoy the most, is hearing from the other doctors who've been out and served. So we're going to take this opportunity for this webinar for them to share their experience, and then you can be free to ask them questions towards the end. So our mission statement for Mission Doctors. I just want to share with you, this is how we are as an organization. We are following Christ's call to heal the sick. Mission Doctors provides life-saving medical care for the poor and training for local health care professionals around the world. It is always our vision to work ourselves out of a job, and that is definitely what we are certainly trying to do at all times. And so our next slide, I think it is essential, always to start at the beginning, and this is our beginning. And for those of you who heard this before and could probably give this talk for me, Monsignor Anthony Browers learned about the needs when he was in Lagos, Nigeria. He attended a Marian Congress, and when it was over, he stayed behind. He was the director of the propagation of the faith here in Los Angeles. He stayed in Africa and he traveled all over. He wanted to visit with the priests and brothers and sisters and ask how those of us in the United States could be of help. And he said later, when he heard, it actually surprised him. He had actually expected to hear, Monsignor, go back to the United States and raise money to build a church or a school or a hospital. And he said there were certainly requests for money, but overwhelmingly he heard 3 words: we need help. He met priests and brothers who were involved with every secular task that kept them from doing what they had come to do. There were religious sisters who were pulling teeth without training, and I always say that pains me even to think about it. There was one bishop who spent part of the time delivering the mail and fixing the Jeeps. So we know that this is certainly something that can be, it had its origin in 1954, and then he returned to Los Angeles and began the program right here. I started the Lay Mission Helpers in 1955 to send teachers and nurses, accountants, administrators, and then 4 years later, working with the Catholic Physicians Guild, created Mission Doctors Association. So our founder, Monsignor Browers, really did have a unique vision for mission, and we are very proud of that founding, and we kind of think of ourselves as standing on those shoulders. So in 1965, oops, excuse me, I'm going to go past that a little bit. From the beginning, even when the program began, even though it began before Vatican II, before Doctors Without Borders, there was a formation program. And the formation program for those who served long-term was at that time 9 months, and it went 2 evenings a week and on Saturday afternoon. It's subsequently been changed to a 4-month formation program, but it's always been recognized as being an important part of what we do in preparing people to serve. And we began the short-term program. Well, this is more about the long-term program. I'm sorry, Jess. I'm probably jumping ahead too fast. Excuse me. So the short-term program began in 1997, and it began to help meet that need for doctors who were available to serve 1 to 3 months. And so we started that in 1997. We still sometimes refer to it as our new program, but it is been around for a while now and has seen a great deal of opportunities for people to go. Now, what we have done for the doctors who have been thinking about going short term is we do a retreat seminar, and we do this now, obviously not during COVID, but we do this twice a year. We do this in the spring at Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles, and then we do it in the fall at Loyola Stritch in Chicago. And these 2 weekends provide the opportunity for doctors to come together and kind of look at the opportunities for service, look at the various countries that are serving, to reflect on the call to serve in light of your faith as well. So we think this is an important opportunity, and we hope to be able to be back together next spring doing this in Los Angeles. So God willing, if that's a possibility, we'll schedule it and we'll keep you posted on that. So the next natural question after looking at the how we do it is, where can you serve? And I just want to share very briefly with you a couple of the locations where we're currently involved, and we'll give you a lot more details about that on a weekend. But we have, just to give you an overview, so we are in Ghana, in the Diocese of Ho, and the Diocese of Damongo. We have been in Ho at 2 hospitals. Margaret Marquardt is currently looking for family practice and ophthalmology, and Fuega Hospital is looking for family practice and OBGYN. The Diocese of Damongo is specifically looking for surgeons. So this is Ghana, and while apparently the airports have just opened up again, MDA is still not quite ready to send people. We want to wait a little bit longer. We don't want to send people out when the risk of becoming ill and without the possibility for service becomes an issue. The Jennings were serving in Ho at Fuego Hospital at the time that everything hit the fan. They actually had planned to stay, but when Robin was due to have their 3rd child, gratefully they followed the advice of the Department of State and came home, and it was the right thing to do. After delivering a healthy baby, she had a medical crisis that was quite serious, and so we are grateful to the Holy Spirit for bringing them home safely and for a healthy baby and a healthy mama. So they're currently working in Oregon and looking to getting out again when it's possible. So that, and the bishop has certainly asked us to continue to look for people. This is we're also in Peru, and this is in the far north in the Amazon region. It is a small hospital. Here they are looking for OBGYNs, family practice, for surgeons, pediatricians, urology. It is a small facility, but they are actually treating 20,000 people up and down the river. So it's quite a remarkable location. We've had doctors serve here long-term and short-term, and they're really right now in a position where they're really hoping that people can come soon. Tony Lulo and Brian Metternach, a married couple, served there long-term, and in the process they were able to bring students from Loyola Stritch as well, and they hope to continue that when the opportunity to go back to Peru is available. And also then we look in Tanzania, in the Same Mountains in the north of Tanzania. We have a couple, Mark and Molly Druffner, who've been going here since 2010 annually, and they have also taken short-term doctors with them, and here they're providing primary care and specialty care, but a lot of OB work here is done as well. They live in Minnesota. They're really always happy be a point of contact for this location. And we'll talk more about that one too. And then we are, and have been for some time, in Uganda, in the extreme southwest of Uganda. And Uganda, if you've been to Uganda, it's just a beautiful location. There are 3 hospitals in the southwest. It is, the 3 hospitals that are here are different sizes. 2 of them are fairly large, but here they are also looking pretty much for almost any specialist. We have a pediatrician who goes here annually, and this is Lou Coda, and he and his wife make an annual trip of about 3 or 4 months. And they were among the people who also hadn't planned to come home last February, but again in March, when the State Department said come back, they thought they ought to follow that, because at that point they were pretty much being told they'd be stuck there if they didn't come home. So Lou and Marty came back, but also another couple that are looking forward to getting back to Uganda. It's really a great location and a lot of needs here, but it's good. So I'm going to turn it over because this is the emergency room. One of the unique things in Uganda is Mission Doctors was responsible for the construction of what was at that time only the 2nd emergency room in the country. And beyond that, this young doctor here, Mark Bizanzo, was from Harvard, and he and his wife and a group of other students from Harvard, when they finished their residency, they began a program for training nurses in a triage, which was really the greatest gap in Uganda. And that program has continued. They continue to have, now again, they're on hold as well, but they continue to have doctors come to train nurses in triage. They have sent nurses out to other hospitals to work, and it has had a remarkable impact on the outcome for patients, which was one of the big concerns that our surgeon had at the time. So I'm going to begin by turning this over to Carol and ask her to invite her to share her experience with Mission Doctors that she had serving with our sweet Franciscan sisters in Cameroon. And I really thank you, Carol, for taking the time to be with us. Carol, it's always so much fun to have you on the retreats when you're there to share your experience. So thank you for saying yes and being with us. We're really grateful. So, and Carol, when you want Jessica to advance the slide, just say advance or something, just let her know, okay? And she'll put the slides forward. Okay, well, there you go.
As Elise said, my name is Carol Hassenjäger, and I was fortunate enough to serve in Douala, Cameroon in 2017. And if you can show my first slide, Elise, that shows how I feel about that. It was truly a life-changing experience in many ways, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. When we come back, I will probably be the first in line saying, Elise, send me back. So, although we can't be there right now, Elise thought sharing some of my experiences would give you a feel for what work is like in a very different setting from that which you're used to, and it is very different. I am an obstetrician gynecologist, and though your area of expertise is probably different from mine, some of the challenges that you will encounter will likely be similar. I don't know if there's anyone among us who's not a traveler. I am not a traveler. I am definitely a homebody. Before I went to Africa, I had been to Canada with my grandfather, Mexico with the Girl Scouts, and London with my father. And I was 34 when I went to London, and he wasn't sure I could handle it, so he went with me. So London, where they speak English. But I made it to Africa just fine. I did get lost in the Paris airport, both on the way there and the way back, but I made it. I worried a great deal that no one would be there to greet me, but of course that was not true. The sisters were there to greet me, and they very quickly and safely delivered me to St. Padre Pio Hospital. And St. Padre Pio himself is said to have advised that we, quote, pray, hope, and don't worry. And those are very good things to remember when you're going to do medical missionary work. Can you give me the next slide, Elise? So the first thing you notice about this picture is the metal gate and the razor wire at the top of the wall. And that brings us to the issue of safety. It is a concern when you work in the mission field, but I always felt safe while I was there. So the night I got there, I had been traveling for 24 hours, and I heard murmurs about a patient needing a C-section. Now, nobody wanted to ask me because they knew I'd been traveling, and I'm sure I looked tired and disoriented. But I knew how to do a C-section. I mean, I've been doing them for 35 years, so I figured I could pull it off. Now, as I look back, my naivete was a little laughable. So I put on the scrubs that I brought with me, which was probably a good thing because the rest of the time when I was there, I was wearing scrub tops that were at least would go around me twice, and scrub pants with broken strings that sort of ended at mid-calf. There were shoe covers of sort, but they weren't very practical. And instead, everybody wore Crocs. You know, those big white things that kind of look like clown shoes. At least they did on me. So everybody wore those. The OR itself was very basic, and it wouldn't meet any of the criteria for sterility or safety that we're used to here. And after a while, I hardly noticed the ants that were sometimes crawling around on the floor. So I go to the OR, and the first thing I look for is a scrub sink, and there was one. I was happy to see, but there was only one very well-used scrub brush and a bottle of betadine. So I washed my hands with the betadine, and I headed in to be gowned, and everyone sort of stopped and looked at me, and they said, "You don't have on your apron." Can you show the next slide? So I went back out, and I put on my apron, and I re-washed my hands, and I went back in. And then Sister told me to hold up my hands, and she sprayed them with rubbing alcohol. And then I was helped into my gown. It was one of green cloth like they show on the MASH TV show. So I had that, and I'm allergic to a lot of gloves, so I brought my own gloves, which was really nice because the gloves they had were not quite of the quality that we're used to here. They had face masks, but they're thinner than any mask I've seen here. They didn't have any eye coverings, but I had remembered to bring glasses, so I had eye coverings, so that was good. So now I was ready to go, and my adrenaline levels were pretty high. So the patient was very comfortable, as she'd had a spinal. And that was one thing that was better in Cameroon than I've encountered here. They don't have what they need to do general anesthesia. So the anesthesia techs were really good at giving spinals. They gave them fast and they gave them good. So that was good. The drapes that they draped the patient with were cloth, and there was no barrier between me and the patient, so we could look at each other throughout the case, which was a little strange. They handed me the suction tubing, and it looked like a hose, kind of a small hose. It didn't have any tip on it. I looked at the instruments that were laid out, and there weren't a lot of choices, and some of them I didn't recognize. So everything's ready to go. And I asked for a scalpel, and everybody looks at me strangely. We hadn't prayed yet. So we did. We did before that case and every case. And if you've spent very much time in an OR, you've been praying for years, but not out loud and not routinely. But there we always prayed. Even if it was one of those quick, you know, like boom, 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 we prayed. And that was always good because it was very calming and a centering thing for all of us, including the patient. So they hand me a scalpel. Now, a scalpel is a scalpel, I'm pleased to say. And a gravid uterus is a gravid uterus, whether you're in Cameroon or wherever you are. And babies come out the same way there as they come out here. So all's going well, and the baby's soon delivered and handed off to Sister. And I'm like feeling good. And they hand me the needle holder. And I've never seen a needle holder like this. It was very long and curved, and I still don't know what it was actually designed for. But I used it. They actually had 3 needle holders where I was. They had that one, which I'd never seen before. They had one that didn't hold a needle, and they had one that did hold a needle. So the day you got the one that held the needle was a really Good day. As you know, a C-section can be a very bloody and fluid-filled thing. And you go through a lot of lap sponges, but not Douala. You get 4 lap sponges. Now, you can have more if you ask. Sister will give you more, but she doesn't want to give you more. And you can't really blame her because they don't throw them away. They wash them by hand and we use them. So you make do. And this is where the plastic apron comes in. It actually works very well to keep your body dry, but the cloth gown can only absorb so much. And when it's reached the maximum, the blood and the fluid drips down from the bottom of the gown and it lands in your big white Crocs. So here I am, sleep deprived, culturally disoriented, and standing in a pool of blood and body fluid that isn't mine. And I have now just delivered my first Cameroonian baby, and it was cool. It was really good. Can you show my next slide, Elise? So not all of my time was spent in the OR. This is the picture of our labor room. This is the only time that I saw it empty. I was there one evening trying to take pictures without being rude. And this was the only time I saw it empty. But as you can see, there's 2 beds. There's no sheets or anything. If you don't happen to get a bed, then you labor in a hallway. It's a very long hallway with a bench. And sometimes we would have as many as 15 women sitting on the bench. And as you know, you can labor for many hours or even days. There's no air conditioning. It's very hot. There's 1 communal bathroom. There's no shower or anything like that. There's no gowns. The women sit on the benches in their regular clothes, and every 4 hours or so, they're brought across the hall to be examined in our triage room. Want to show the next picture? That's our triage room. So the woman comes in, she takes off her underpants, she kind of puts them up by the pillow, scoots her bottom down to that bowl area, and she gets checked. There's no privacy whatsoever. I mean, people are walking in and out the whole time, which was a little disconcerting for me, but it didn't seem to bother anybody else. There also didn't seem to be much respect for patient autonomy or input. But once again, that's a cultural difference, and I wasn't there to impose my cultural ideas on anybody else. And once again, it didn't bother anybody but me. There wasn't any fetal monitoring, although the nurses did auscultate the fetal heart rate when they saw the woman every few hours, and basically it was there or it wasn't there. Can you show the next slide? This is our delivery table. The patient walks into the room, she climbs up on the bed, which does have a sheet on it for delivery. She delivers her baby and she walks back out. There aren't any epidurals or anything like that. There's not a lot of coddling. The nurses are very businesslike. They're very good, but they're very businesslike. You came to have a baby, that's what you're going to do. When the baby's born, they take it across the room, they wash it in the sink, and they dress it in the outfit that the family has brought. And that's one thing that I noticed and appreciated. No matter how little the family had, every new baby had a beautiful new outfit to wear. So they dress the baby and then they take it out in the hall where the women are laboring and the family is waiting, and everyone receives it with great joy and thanksgiving. Children are very much desired. Excuse me. Next slide, please. And that's sort of my segue into my office. That's my office. The table's a little rickety. I kind of think it was a urology table, but I'm not sure. There's no air conditioning, anything like that. The things that I saw were very similar to the things I see here in the US, the usual gynecologic complaints and concerns. And I was comfortable handling those, although my choice of medications was much less than it is here, and I didn't always recognize the things that were on the formulary. I did take my my computer, and I did have internet. There wasn't always internet in all of Cameroon, excuse me, in Cameroon, but where I was, there was internet. And if you're an UpToDate user, I'm a big UpToDate fan. I had purchased UpToDate, the kind where you can actually download it on your computer. So I took that with me, and I was often able to figure out what the medicines were, or if I couldn't figure that out, I could sort of figure out which on their formulary I might want to use. Um, the things people asked me were sometimes a little different. I was never asked about contraception, not a single time. But every day I would see a couple of patients who were concerned that they hadn't conceived in 2 or 3 months, and so they wanted an infertility evaluation. As I said, children are very, very important. It was challenging to use an interpreter. Most of my patients spoke French, and they would just sort of smile when I would try to speak French. It took me a long time to figure out bien dormé, which means did you sleep well? So I don't speak very much French. Some of them spoke English, but I did the best that I could. I had an interpreter each time, which if you work with an interpreter, and I actually work with interpreters very much in my practice here in the United States, you're not always sure you're understanding what the patient's trying to tell you, and you're not always sure what you want to say is being told to the patient. I remember one of my infertility patients, the translator said, well, can I tell her if she would just relax, she would be fine and have a baby? I said, well, please don't. Please don't tell her that, because first of all, that's not true. And I didn't say that. So you don't always know what's being said back and forth, but you do the best that you can. I would always run late, and I would start out like I always do in my office here, and I would apologize for the delay. And the patients would look at me kind of strangely. Waiting for them is a whole different experience than waiting for us. They expect to wait. They expect to spend their entire morning or their entire afternoon waiting for you, and nobody seems to mind. So that was good. So much of the time, you'll be dealing with things you're familiar with, but not always. You quickly learn that you're not going to have everything you are used to having, everything you want, or even everything you need. One of my Saturdays on call illustrates this very well. Can I see the next slide? Okay, those are my people waiting to be seen, but we'll just leave it right there. So I'm on call on Saturday, I'm making rounds, and I get told that a woman has called and saying her baby's not moving right. And this is a lady who has no children. She's 34 weeks along. She's had several miscarriages. She's had surgery to remove fibroids from her uterus because they thought maybe that was why she was miscarrying. So she comes in, and indeed the baby is dead. She has suffered an intrauterine fetal demise. So I'm in a difficult position here. She's not in labor. The only medicine that we have to put her into labor is contraindicated in somebody who's had major surgery on her uterus, which she had, so we can't use that. You hate to operate on somebody for a dead baby, especially somebody who's already had major surgery on their uterus. So we decided to wait. I mean, you can wait for a dead baby as long as the mom can psychologically accept that that's the condition. So we talked about it a long time with her and her family, and no decisions were made without family input. It's very much a family affair. And we decided to wait. But that afternoon, she developed pain, which I couldn't handle with typical pain medication. And so we decided that we had to take her to surgery. So we did. And indeed, she had ruptured her uterus. So we delivered the dead baby, and we did everything we could think of to try to save her uterus. Also should mention, I don't have a blood bank. There's no blood available. But we couldn't, so we had to send someone out and ask permission from her husband to take her uterus out, which he gave us, and we did in an effort to save her life. So we're done, and we're cleaning up the OR, and someone casually mentions that now he will divorce her. And I was, what? And they said, well, she can't have any children, and so he'll divorce her now. So I was a little blown away. And as I'm leaving, the nurses come running up to me, and they say there is a patient that has just come through our door. She's had 3 or 4 babies before, and she's about to have this one, and the baby's breech. Now I'm old, so I know how to deliver a breech baby because older obstetricians know how to do it. Younger ones in the United States have often never done it or seen it because we just don't do it. So I was a little anxious, But I thought, well, I've done this before and I know how to do this. And she's on the triage table, the one you saw with the little bowl in it. She never made it to the delivery room. But I've never had double nuchal arms. What that means is the baby's arms are both up by its head and you can't get the baby out. So I am standing there thinking to myself, this baby's going to die. We got it out. I still don't know how we got it out. Excuse me. And the baby was okay. So I'm like, okay, you know, I've now taken out a uterus, and now I think the baby's going to die. I'm headed to the chapel. I'm like, I need to unwind and say thank you for getting me out of this. But I'm not out the door before the nurses say there is another lady, and she also has no children. She lost a baby the year before at about 20 weeks, and they thought she had an incompetent cervix, or a cervix that's too weak to hold in the baby. So they put a stitch in it. So I examined her, and the baby is in the vagina. So this is an 18-week baby, and we can't save 18-week babies even here. So the baby delivers, and she holds it while it dies. So this is pretty awful. She delivers the baby, but she doesn't deliver the placenta. And that's okay. That happens here too. And usually if you wait a few hours, the placenta comes and everything's fine. And you can give a medicine that we did have in Cameroon to give to her. But you can't wait if someone's hemorrhaging. And that's what she's doing. So you have to get the placenta out so she stops bleeding. So remember, there's a stitch in her cervix. So I need to cut the stitch so I can get the placenta. They don't have the instruments that I need to see the stitch. So I can't see it. So I decided, well, I'll do it blindly. I'll feel it with my fingers, and I'll work the scissors up there, and I'll cut the stitch. But it didn't work. And remember, she's hemorrhaging. I have no blood bank. She also has no anesthesia. So I have to work my fingers up there through that cervix, and thank goodness I have skinny fingers, and shear off that placenta and pull it out. Now she's screaming, as anyone would be if they were going through what's happening to her. And I am praying, please help me, please help me, please help me, thinking this is not good. And as I'm doing this, out of the corner of my eye, there's a little gray mouse that runs across the room. Now, if I was home, I would be up on a chair. I would be screaming, mouse, 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 just like they do in the cartoons. But it just kind of registered with me, and I went, huh, and kept on trying to get the placenta out, which eventually we did. And now it's morning. And so I had to breakfast, and Sister Pauline always has a wonderful breakfast for me, and she always sits with me and talks to me and asks about my day. So she says, how was your night? I heard it was a rough one. No, I tell her about it, and including the mouse. And she goes, oh, just one? And I was like, yeah, just one. She goes, oh, how big was it? I said, I don't know, bell-sized? And I showed her with my fingers. And she said, well, isn't that wonderful? They used to be so much bigger, and we had so many more. And so it really is about attitude and perspective and blessings, if you have the eyes to see them. And later that morning on rounds, the patient looks at me and she says, thank you for taking such good care of me. And that pretty much sums up medical missionary. Thank you.
Carol, thank you so much. I know that when I mentioned to Jim and Terry, and they can reiterate this when they come on, that you loved Douala and you couldn't wait to be back there. This is from Jim and Terry, who spent more than 3 years in Cameroon. They were like, oh my goodness. Douala is kind of famous for, you know, being one of the heavier assignments. And we had one of our OBGYNs, they had done, Jim and Terry reminded me, he did 10 C-sections in one day. And he said that was the most he'd ever done in his career. So he was, that was Jim Unger, and Jim and his wife and his daughter were there for a little over a month, about 6 weeks. And so Jim also found Dwala challenging but rewarding. And I think that's the reality of it, is that, but like all medicine, right? I mean, all of medicine is, but when you are faced with challenges that are unexpected, but it does leave you with a different heart. It does change how you view things when you come back. As you said, people, the waiting isn't an issue for them. The gratitude that they have for the fact that you're there is unique. And so I really thank you, Carol, for taking the time. We'll let people ask questions at the end, unless somebody's got something really specific right now they'd like to ask. They can pop into the chat, or we can, you can turn off your mic for a quick second if you've got a question for Carol. We can go on to Jim and Terry. We can do questions at the end if we can do that. All right. Well, thanks again, Carol. I'm going to turn it over to Jim and Terry and let them share their experience as well. There's another one of our dear Franciscan sisters.
Hello to everyone. I'm glad you could make this, and I guess I'm going to begin talking a little bit about, I guess, our experience, or how we arrived with MDA. And I'll talk about my call because I think everyone gets called to mission in a different way. My method was the Thunderbolt. I was at Terry and I had just been married. It was our second year of medical school, or my second year, and we were attending a Sunday Mass at the Newman Center at the University of Minnesota. And it must have been Mission Sunday, and there was a visiting priest from Africa. And as I walked out of Mass that day, I knew that someday I would be going to Africa as a doctor, volunteering my services. And my wife of 45, 46 years, 46,
but you're close.
Will attest I don't always share things with her, but I eventually shared that call about 30 years later. As a matter of fact, I couldn't believe she didn't remember the smell of singed hair from the back of my neck from that lightning bolt when it hit me. But actually, probably 25 years later, with the invention of the internet, I remember one day just typing in a search engine, medical mission, and then added Catholic at the end, and eventually found Mission Doctors Association. And I think it was really the preparation that their program offered, whether it was the weekend short-term retreat or the 4 to 5 month formation prior to long-term, that really made me think it was an organization that got you prepared when they sent you out. And that eventually, internet search, led to calling Elise. And as a matter of fact, I called Elise, whether it was once a year for several years, until we finally made a short-term retreat. But we eventually made it there.
Right. I finally consented to go to the short-term retreat, and I thought, okay, we'll see what this is about. And by the end of the weekend, I kind of thought, I guess I think I can do this. I mean, it's only 30 days, right? You can do anything for 30 days. But I had this kind of concern that I'm sure anybody going out on their first one would have, as you know what the physician's going to do, but what is their spouse going to do? And that really kind of was concerning to me. Well, that very first time I ended up, I worked in the orphanage that was affiliated there, that the same sisters, the Tertiary Sisters of St. Francis, also ran. And I did feedings, but I had a background in speech and language development. So I'd worked with developmentally delayed kids. And so it was, so I did, language develop as in vocalizing, verbalizing. I obviously couldn't speak their language, but I did some physical therapy and those kinds of things. I also, there was staff members was working on a research project. So I spent some time collating data for his project. And then that kind of led us to short-term. We eventually did long-term, and I found that concern, we had a number of visiting doctors who came short-term, and frequently the spouse was concerned about what they were going to do for a month. We were able to sort of facilitate that, knowing where that spouse's interests were before they came. Some of them worked in the orphanage. We had one doctor who came and his college student daughter came with him, and she was so techno savvy by comparison to what they had there. And she worked in the HIV unit and got all of their records on the computer. They'd been working on it for months and months and had like 10 records on. She did over 1,000 of them in the 2 weeks that she was there. We had some who had nursing skills, so they would work in the hospital or with their physician spouse. We had a retired teacher. The sisters also had a school that was just up the hill. And this retired teacher was able to work with students that kind of needed a little extra help because class sizes were huge. I taught in the school on the long-term mission for 2 of the 3 years. And then the 3rd year, I always say I was impersonating a nurse. I had been Nurse Sunday because they were short-staffed in the hospital on Sundays. So when Jim would make rounds, I would help him, with charts and getting labs for him or whatever he needed. So the 3rd year, I actually ended up working with him full time, kind of his, he says I was his radar O'Reilly. I was kind of his little gopher to go get him this or that or whatever he needed, or an interpreter kind of thing. So those things all worked out really, really well for us.
And as a matter of fact, we ended up, did the first short-term in Cameroon and then did a 2-month short-term mission in Zimbabwe, which the Stoutons who were there, I think they were into their like 12th of 14 years in the mission, really allowed us to see that it was something that we could do in terms of accomplishing doing a long-term 3-year mission. And as a result, we ended up doing the formation class in LA, and it was really invaluable to us. It was a good transition for us, separating us from home and family here before going overseas. And once in the field, particularly in Cameroon, they have so many strong ties to Europe. There were innumerable European volunteers who came through the hospital, and usually they had no preparation, and they would frequently demonstrate really no tolerance for the local customs, culture. They couldn't understand why the hospital wasn't doing the same sort of procedure protocol that they were in Europe. And there was a marked difference from the mission doctors who would come compared to the untrained. And again, not picking on the Europeans, but they were kind of the control group. And I think
we have plenty that come from the US that aren't well trained as well.
True. But I guess I'd like to probably share with you a typical day for us, that both long and short term.
Well, yeah, that was really a highlight for us because that was an important piece that this was a Catholic. I remember saying to Jim before we did it, this has to be about Jesus or I don't think I can do it. And so we started our day with Mass, and we would go to the Sisters' Chapel for Mass every morning. And it was just it was a great beginning to the day. And then we would have, a little 10-minute conversation outside the chapel after Mass with Sister Zavaria. And I think that's the slide you're looking at, who was like, she's a woman beyond, she's a saint. And one day we'll know her name. But Sister Zavaria, after our little rendezvous after Mass, our day was made, and everything else nothing was going to go badly. It was going to be a good day. So
once we finished Mass, had our pep talk with Sister Zavaria, it was usually back to the house for a breakfast, and then we would go up to the medical ward and do rounds. My background is family practice, so the hospital in Ginicom was a 220-bed hospital, staffed by three. There were 3 doctors previously there, African doctors, a surgeon, an obstetrician, and general practice doctor, and then I made the 4th. So I took care of all the pediatrics and the medical wards, both men and female, and then did medical consults on the surgical wards and pediatrics also. And so, and the 220 beds were generally full, and we also did 50,000 outpatient visits yearly. And that may seem pretty daunting in terms of the workload, but when you have limited diagnostics and limited therapeutics, it really streamlines the whole medical experience, and you could really get through patients quite efficiently, compared to the United States. As a matter of fact, I was chastised more than once, by the African doctors that I was spending way too long, 5 or 10 minutes with a single patient. But things worked out. And one would also think that those numbers I would see typically, besides maybe 30, 40 inpatients in the hospital, another 30, 40 in the clinic. But it wasn't overbearing, first because most of our patients spent typically maybe 2 or 3 hours to get to the hospital, whether that was via walking or public transportation, which usually meant a bus ride part of the way and a motorcycle ride from town. And as a result of that, they also needed 2 or 3 hours to get home by the time they finished at the clinic. Therefore, the clinic would actually start winding down usually by 2 or 3 o'clock. And I would typically finish seeing all my patients usually by 4 in the afternoon, plus minus, an hour. So the amount of daily time was not overwhelming. And since
I want to interrupt you just for a minute, Jim. One of the things that was unique about Jim and Terry's experience, it's because of their personality. These two have the capacity to connect with people in not just not just, on a service level. The patients obviously connected with you very well, but the staff and the support staff and the sisters. And then you would write these wonderful blogs about your time in mission. You two are not only great communicators, but you're also deep. You make deep connections with people. And I think that it's a unique gift you have. And I think it was honored and appropriate in your service in Cameroon. So I know you wanted to talk about that a little too.
Well, actually, we were going to talk about that because that was kind of some of the fun part, and kind of a little backfill on it. We have these really good friends here at home that we kind of had a standing Wednesday night. We called it date night. In fact, we now share a credit card with this other couple, and we call that our date night card. But at any rate, we wanted to continue our date nights. So even though we went for walks each day at the end of the clinic day, and we'd walk into the village on Wednesday night, we'd have date night. So we would go into the little pub and have a beer. Well, then we kind of got thinking, we would watch the couples, and it would be, once they got married, the men socialized with the men and the women socialized with the women. And you never saw them together as husband and wife. Even in church, the men sat on one side and the women sat on another side. And so we kind of thought we would like to model maybe married couple and enjoying each other's company. So we started inviting one staff member to go with us on Wednesday nights. And customary there, first of all, if you invite someone to go with you, you pay the bill. So they were quite happy to get the invite, and Dr. Jim was happy to pay because it was pretty inexpensive. But there was one rule: they had to bring their spouse.
You want to see the next slide?
Sure.
Oh, yes. Good idea. So this is one of our very favorite people is Beau Paul, which his real name is Henry, but Beau Paul means father of Paul. They had their firstborn son, and for them it was their only child. His name was Paul, so they would call him Beau Paul. So he and his wife Rufina were one of our favorite ones to invite. He was one of our drivers. He also was Mr. Fix-It. He could fix anything, and he, if something was wrong at the house, we'd just call Beau Paul and he'd be right there. So next slide. Oh, this is Maybelle and Mac. He ran the HIV unit and she was the head surgical nurse or surgical ward nurse. And again, that was the rule. You gotta bring your spouses, and we found those evenings to be, and they really were just late afternoons because we had to walk, the 20, 30 minutes back home before dark. But those were really fun times for us. And I think the next slide, Jess, these were the only ones who got to go on date night without a spouse, because these were three of the single nurses there. So we had date night or girls' night with Dr. Jim.
And Germer on the left was my nurse the first 2 years before before she was replaced by Nurse Sunday. Actually, Germer took over the head nurse position. She was not bumped out.
And she actually had skills.
And I think there's another slide.
Is there one more slide? This was Iman and Belta. Again, he was a driver, and that's another one of our date nights. We had a lot of Wednesdays.
So there's lots of things could talk about, but I guess I'm going to maybe close with just one patient story that probably illustrates some of the things that went on. So Jess, if you could do the next slide. The patient in my arms is Marcus, an 11-year-old boy who went to school that very morning bright-eyed and totally normal. By the time his mother got home in the afternoon from working in the fields, he had been brought home and he was comatose. And she brought him to the hospital. He had a high fever and immediately he looked like a typical cerebral malaria patient. And typically, you know, I would see the patient in the clinic and write orders as the nurses were getting things ready to bring him up to the medical ward. But this child, sometimes you just have that feeling in your gut. And I just grabbed him and carried him up to the medical or pediatrics so the nurses could immediately start working on an IV. And so within probably an hour, we had his test back and he was certainly positive for malaria. And again, in a much deeper coma than the average cerebral malaria child we would see. And so we got him started on the typical quinine drip, and you would leave the, you know, I think I probably checked on Marcus a couple times by the end of the workday, and probably even went up after dinner just to check on him. One of the advantages when you're living at the hospital compound, you can just take a few minutes and check on a patient. But again, with a patient like this, you just didn't sleep well because from experience, you knew, it was always a question, would he be there in the morning? And, you know, we'd go to morning mass, pray, and as we walked up, Terry and I would be looking at each other, just anxiously, you know, hoping to see someone in the bed. And fortunately, Marcus was still there. And because he was so severely ill, we put a Foley catheter in to monitor his fluids in and out. And I couldn't find the slide, but this child had, because of the severe hemolysis from his malaria, his urine was very dark. And if any of you are familiar with the old term Blackwater fever, in Africa, frequently when children had malaria and their urine turned dark, it was a very ominous sign, and not too many children survived. But Marcus stayed comatose for about 2 or 3 days, again, longer than the average child. But I think on the third morning, we walked up into the peds ward and his mother was smiling. And that was always the first sign that the child had begun to wake up. And Marcus, over the next several days, next slide. Marcus, you know, began to wake up. We must have, he obviously had a feeding tube to give him some nourishment, but he wasn't all there initially. And you always wondered, because with cerebral malaria, there can be some permanent brain dysfunction. But over the next several days, next slide, Marcus was able to get out of bed, started walking, and I believe probably about a week after admission, he was well enough to go home. Next slide. And pretty amazing from the child we had seen a week earlier. And next slide. In Cameroon, it's interesting. The incidence of twins, I believe in the US, at least when I trained centuries ago, twins were 1 in 88 deliveries. In Cameroon, Carol might nod, or our experience, it's like 1 in 10 to 20 deliveries are twins. And
The yams.
the amazing part is so we had a control. And if I was worried about Marcus's brain function, you would think Marcus was on the right, but he was actually on the left, and he looks he looks brighter than his twin. But in fairness, the twin, it was probably the first time he was ever in a hospital. Marcus was used to being there for a week, so his twin, I think, was rather petrified. And what this case typically, I think, demonstrates is, we had limited diagnostics, limited therapeutics, but with a little bit of medicine, your presence as a doctor, severe illness resulted in miracles almost every day. And we were so fortunate to witness them. That's
chicken.
He
one last thing. One important part of the story. I'm so grateful
that people were so grateful for the care you extended, and Marcus's family somehow found out that we were leaving, and just a couple days before the completion of our 3 years, the guard knocked on our door and said there was someone to see us, and we had a little patio outside the home, and we went outside, and Marcus and his mother and his twin were there, and they had brought us a live chicken to show their gratitude for, the care we had rendered Marcus. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Jim and Terry. Honestly, what's nice about the retreat seminars is people get to sit around and have lunch together, have dinner together, and really spend this time visiting more. So, look forward to the opportunity of being together with all of you at one of the retreat seminars. I'm going to ask if you would be willing to do one little thing for me. Those of you who don't have your camera on, if you'd be willing to put your camera on. One of the things we do at the retreat seminar is we take a quick photo of the people who are with us. So if you can turn your camera on for just a quick minute, we'd like to get a quick photo of my group here. If you're willing, I'll take a quick photo, and it's how we kind of say, oh, look who was with us today. And then, so if you don't mind turning your photo on, Tiffany and Rachel. Oh, Rachel's with us. Hi, Rachel. Mary Jane, I didn't see your name, Rachel. Great, I'm glad you're here. Hi, Tiffany. Everybody turn your camera on just for a quick minute. I'll take a photo. And if you really don't want to turn your camera on, I respect it. But Rachel, I want to see you. But otherwise, I'll take a quick picture and we'll have it. And we kind of know who you are. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. And we'll put that on. There we go. We got a quick picture of our group here. Thank you. And then we'll look forward to it. Now, I don't see any questions yet in the chat, but what I want to do is I want to look at the questions that tend to, the couple of people who weren't able to be with us at the last minute. Someone had asked, when do we anticipate going out again? And I don't know if any of you have access to a crystal ball about COVID. I would ask that you send me a quick email. Obviously, we want to keep you all safe. We want to keep you well. We don't want to risk sending we don't want to risk sending you somewhere where any type of COVID treatment is not available. I think when the people left Honduras, they told us the reason they had been asked to leave is that in a country with 11 million people, they were told there are five respirators. So they said, please go. And so we don't like to send people unless we have a good sense of your safety. And so we're keeping an eye on situation. So we do not yet know. We are hopeful, as everyone is, that we are looking at a time when vaccinations will be available. Someone else asked about other locations in Latin America besides Peru. We are connected to a site in Belize, which is a clinic facility, and they often, when things are normal, have students coming in from, and that's actually, this is one of the questions that, I don't want to mispronounce your name. Is it Lika? Is that how you pronounce your name? Yes.
Ilka.
Ilka, okay. You asked specifically about outpatient, and that one in Belize is actually one of those locations. It is not an inpatient facility. It is strictly a freestanding clinic. And in normal times, when there isn't COVID going on, they often have students and residents from the US coming here. And those students and residents come and are able to work, and so the doctors who come from the US are often able to provide oversight for students and residents that come as well. And Diane just said, do you need a license in the country where you will work? This varies completely from country to country. There are some countries, Ghana, for example, where paperwork needs to be done in advance for licensing. Cameroon, if you are working with a Cameroonian physician, they only need you to bring a copy of your current license. So the answer to this is dependent on location, but it's a good question because it certainly is something we always want to make sure we don't want to send you somewhere if it's a place you definitely need a license ahead of time.
At least certainly my experience, Cameroon, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, not only, never checked, probably required, but never checked.
Yeah, in Ghana, it's actually required, and the Catholic hospitals will not let you work there unless you've done the paperwork for it. So, and I actually think this will be the trend. I think this will be a trend. I don't think it's a bad trend, because then they are making sure that they have people who have done the work to make sure the licenses are accurate. I think the incident of the person in Uganda that was serving without a license, well-intentioned. If you've read that story, unfortunately, I think it has brought a lot to the surface about that issue. So it may be moving more to that direction, but as time comes, we stay posted. Someone else asked, before we serve, can we find out what tools, medication we should bring with us? And that's probably based on Carol's presentation. I certainly think that one of our goals is to be sending short-term people to places where we have people serving long-term, like Jim and Terry. It isn't always possible, but it is always the goal. In advance, when that's possible, we want you to get the formulary in advance. And so that's, and again, that changes from time to time. So we try to make the formulary available to doctors who are coming short-term, or if there's someone there long-term, you're able to answer those questions. And as far as tools, medications, you're only bringing medications for yourself. We generally do not encourage people to bring medication for patients. They can be confiscated at the airport. It's kind of but there are instances where maybe a specific medication is requested before you go. That has certainly happened in the past as well. Happened with one of the patients Jim and Terry took care of for a long time.
Yeah, I look back and we spent a lot of time thinking we were doing good by buying bulk antibiotics like tetracycline and penicillin and amoxicillin, and it really was never utilized once I got it there. As a matter of fact, one of our trips into Cameroon, well, the very first one, we were accosted. Someone opened my luggage and pulled out a bottle of 1,000 tablets of amoxicillin and held it up and started screaming, "Drugs, drugs, he's bringing in drugs," and kind of had to finally get a letter out and show him it was an antibiotic and not something bad. But yeah, there's really.
So I have another question here about family nurse practitioners, and absolutely yes. Family nurse practitioners tend to function almost independently, as do PAs, but very, very much wind up functioning in direct patient care. So absolutely, family nurse practitioners, absolutely. In fact, one of the pictures you might see often on our work, there's a beautiful woman holding a child looking down at her, and that is a nurse practitioner. That is Maria. We use her photo a lot. So yes, so nurse practitioners and PAs, yes, absolutely, absolutely. So let's see, any other questions?
There was also a question in the chat about anesthesiology. Would we take an anesthesiologist?
Anesthesiologists, absolutely. We send anesthesiologists, and a lot of times we had one that went gosh, 6 or 7 years in a row to Cameroon, and she was training folks in anesthesia because the nurses tend to give anesthesia as well. And this was not to Ginicom, but over to in Bamenda. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions? Man, I am so glad we're together here. Let's see, is there a need for an interpreter? So that's why we say Peru, people going to Peru need to speak Spanish. There are some locations, for example, in Africa, where there's like 4 or 5 different little small languages, and so it would have to be translated through sometimes several people. Maybe one of the nurses doesn't speak that, but the nurses will help. The nurses will assist with that. It's really only Spanish for Latin America.
And when we were in Ginicom, we treated patients with 15 different dialects, and the truth is they communicated primarily in Pidgin. And our time would have been better invested in learning Pidgin than it was in learning French that we thought we would have more use for, but we didn't do well at French either. So, you know.
Yeah, I know that people who, because we are serving in the English speaking part of Cameroon, Douala is, however, about 50% French, 50% English. And so if you speak French in Cameroon, it certainly gives you an advantage. So yes, to both internists and family practice, we've had both and both do well. Anything else? Actually, Lou Coda is both an internist and a pediatrician. He's the one who goes annually to Uganda. Wow, guys, that was great. So any other questions, feel free to type them in, but you all have my email. So, if the minute we hang up, you think, oh, I forgot to ask X, Y, and Z, that's what I'm here for. That's why I've been doing this for 39 years. It's because I love you all, and I'm so excited to help you find a way to get out there and serve. And honestly, I wish I knew exactly when this was going to happen. I just unfortunately don't. And so if anybody, as I said, anybody gets a crystal ball or gets that knowledge, please let me know. But for right now, we are looking hopefully at potentially having a retreat at Loyola Marymount in the spring. As we set that up, I'll certainly let you know. But that would be for short term. Marianne Barnhill is applying to the long-term program. We were on 2 calls today, Marianne and I. So Marianne is applying for the long-term program, and she'll be coming out for one of the discernment weekends in the spring, either February or April. And then she'll be joining the long-term formation that is set to begin at the end of next August. She was going to be beginning already. She would have been in a no COVID world, she would already be in long-term formation. So. You know what, let's do do you want to just do a quick go around and introduce yourself? Tell me where you're from. Can we start with Mark? Maybe not, because we're all muted. Maybe that won't work because everybody's muted. Let me see here.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Mark, tell me about yourself. Where are you? What's your specialty?
Atlanta, Georgia, or south there, a place called Peachtree City. And I'm on for my wife, who's not available right now. She's a nurse practitioner.
That's right.
And she's a family nurse practitioner.
That's great. Well, we're going to send everybody a copy of the webinar. It's just going to be, you'll only see the slides. You won't get to see all of our cute faces, but you'll get to see the slides with the audio.
Can we also have the video of the other video, or one you have for long term?
That one was I don't think she recorded that. That was done by our by the program director for that. But I'm happy to talk to you more about that, Mark. If you guys are considering the long term too, you and I can get online maybe next week and we can talk more about it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure. Maria, how about you? Where are you from and what's your specialty?
Hi, I'm a board certified internist and I do primary care and urgent care. And I'm in Mission Viejo, Southern California,
You're not
Orange
far.
County. No, not at all.
Great.
Yeah, so I'm looking to do a short term first.
Fabulous.
or at least, acquire as much information about it as I can. And I'm fluent in Spanish, so I was hoping maybe Latin America instead, but I'm open to anything.
Well, Peru is a really great location. The Peru site is a great location.
Okay.
There's another site in Ecuador that we have been long affiliated with. I do not know the current status of that site. So it's one that we can get back in touch with. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
And I don't know who the DOC initials are, but DOC?
Yes, it's, I'm sorry, I just put my initials.
That's okay.
My name is Desiree Ortiz. I'm a neurologist.
Oh,
I'm in Lawton, Oklahoma. And a couple of years ago, I closed my practice and I have been doing locum tenens. So that allows me to have time. And that's why when I saw this, I'm really very interested. I don't know if you need neurologists, but.
You'd be surprised. And that's the nice thing about the short-term program is that, we're able to send a specialist into a location and they know you're coming. And so, they know, 6 months in advance, they know we have a neurologist who's going to come for a month. Believe me, they'll be prepared and ready for you and waiting for you, anxiously having lined up cases for you to see.
Oh, fantastic. So I'm ready.
Great. Mary Ann, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Mary Ann Barnhill, and I'm a family practice physician, and I'm presently doing locum tenens because I'm planning on doing a long-term position with Mission Doctors Association in the future. And like Elise said, I was supposed to start this year, but it looks like I'll be starting next year.
That's definitely the plan. Thanks, Mary Ann. Nice to see you twice in one day.
I'm
Teresa,
finally getting used to technology.
there you go. You're getting better and better at it all the time.
Yeah.
Teresa, how about you?
Hi. Let's see. Officially, I'm a pediatrician, although I've spent most of my time being mom. So my only opportunity in the last few years, because I'm married to a cardiologist who also does a lot of hospital administration, blah, 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 was never, not home a lot.
Sure.
So I've stayed home with the boys, except for a little bit of clinic work in the last few years. Most of my opportunity to be a pediatrician is on mission trips to Guatemala through the Diocese of Charleston.
Oh, wonderful. So, that's good to know.
I was just looking, I found you because I was not satisfied with the 1 week. They just go for a week and it's just, it goes too fast.
It does go very fast. It's a little hard to feel like you're really connected when you go that short a time, but I'm sure you do a lot of good. How about you, Jim?
Okay, I just took you off mute. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
All right, great. My name is Jim. I'm a family medicine physician in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm on active duty Navy, but I've been in over 22 years. So I'm starting to consider what life after the Navy will look like. And this is one of the opportunities that I've been drawn to. So just learning a few more of that. Broad scope family medicine. So I do inpatient, outpatient, as well as OB. So looking for opportunities.
Jim, you and I need to talk some more. And then I need to do a little arm twisting for the long-term program. Have you thought about the long-term as well?
Yes, I'm keeping all my options open.
Okay, great. Well, we can talk more if you like next week. I can give you more information on the long-term program as well.
Thank you.
Tiffany, how about you?
I'm a PA.
Great.
And I'm currently working in primary care medicine. I was previously working in an urgent care, but I've always wanted to do a mission trip or like just working with like even in like locally, I wanted to work with like homeless people and like that population, but I haven't actually made it there yet. So I guess this is me trying to find out more what options there are out there. So.
Well, we're glad you came on today. Thanks, Tiffany. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ilka, how about you? Where are you located? Did I mispronounce your name terribly again? I'm sorry.
No, Ilka. My name is Ilka Nazario. I am right now. I'm in California. I've been doing locums for the last 4 years. My training was in internal medicine and pediatrics. The locums has been mostly internal medicine and family practice.
Sure. Great. And the short term is what you're looking for right now too?
Short term right now, and I speak Spanish.
Oh, wonderful. As soon as I can get you out there, I will. Diane.
Hi, yes, I'm a family physician. I'm originally from Chile, but I've trained and worked in the US for most of my career, about 18 years. And when my daughter started college, because I'm also widowed, I started to do some international work. So I had generally always worked in community health centers with the underserved and also on the Navajo reservation. So I did some work with floating doctors in Panama for 6 months, and I just recently got back from working with the Maori in New Zealand for 9 months.
Wow.
And so right now I'm doing locums at a clinic for farm workers in California.
Okay.
But I'm very interested.
Where is that?
In Napa, California. Yeah, with vine workers.
Oh my gosh.
And but I'm very interested in the long-term program. I had done some volunteer work with the Missionaries of Charity in Kolkata, and that got me very interested in trying to pull together faith and work.
Let's also take your call next week. We can set up time to talk more about the long-term program too. Great. Very good. Thank you. Thanks so much for being with us. Gosh, I know you guys are really under a lot of smoke up there in Napa. I hope you guys are doing okay.
Yes, it's better right now, so fingers crossed.
Yeah, I hope it stays that way. Rachel, are you there? Rachel, you've been with us before. Will you turn on your mic and let us know how you're doing?
Elise, I have to go. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Nice meeting everybody. Take care.
Went over a little bit. But okay,
God
so
bless.
Rachel, okay, thank you, Maria. I look forward to connecting with you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, God bless. Bye. Okay, Rachel, do you want to turn off your mic and say hi, or that's okay if you don't want to? Certainly okay. Okay, and Lang, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm an anesthesiologist and recently retired, and so with this new time that I found, I wanted to get back into volunteering. About 15 years ago, I did a mission with Medical Ministry International in Ecuador, and I really, really liked that. So recently, I interviewed with Doctors Without Borders. Unfortunately, I found out that they did quite a lot of abortions, and so that kind of traumatized me a little bit, and I just basically Googled Catholic missions and came up. And so I said, oh, I never knew that there was a Catholic medical mission group, and that's why I joined. So I'm really glad to be here. I'm fluent in French. My medical school training was in Paris.
Great. Oh, Lang, thanks so much for being with us. There's certainly a need for anesthesiologists.
I would love to be involved, and my passion is teaching the local healthcare providers, and my subspecialty is OB anesthesia. So,
yeah, in normal times I'd probably have you on a plane next week, but you know, this is the thing. All stay with us, stay connected, because we know the need is there. We know that we're going to be able to get you out there again. And honestly, you have to know how grateful the sisters are and how grateful the patients are for your interest. Please know we're all on this journey together, and you are all really part of us in this. So you're all part of the family now. So thanks for joining us today, and I'll look forward to being with you again soon. And like I said, please just connect with me by phone next week. We'll connect. We'll get some more answers for you, and for those of you who are considering long-term, oh please, there's some more work we got to do.
Before we go, can I just say one thing? And I was sort of the reluctant half of this marriage to go into mission, but I will tell you that, and you'll hear it a million times, that you get way more than you give if you do the mission. But even though we've been back for a number of years now, and I just shared this with Elise yesterday. I said, you know, there's not a day goes by that some part of our day doesn't go, hey, do you remember? Or something that touches us that came from mission. And yeah, I don't think you can ever regret doing it.
No.
And I'm glad that Jim, because he left now, he had a golf game, and that he, you know, I'm glad the lightning bolt hit him.
Yeah, I know Terry wrote an article on our website. I don't know, I'm not exactly sure where it was, but it was called "Following a Call I Didn't Hear," and I honestly think it's one of the best articles on our website. So you know how much I love that, Terry. You know, Terry always speaks from her heart, and sometimes when she shares stories, she can get a little.
Yeah. Hello. Is that not your disease too?
Yes, it is. I'm not saying I don't have the same problem.
And if you have not, there's a beautiful video. It's like 12 minutes long. Did you tell them about that one, Elise?
We're going to send that out we're going to send the video out with the tape of the call.
The one that Michael did?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
So we want to share that with you. You know, honestly, we've been around for 60 years. It's always a little frustrating when I hear doctors have never heard of us, but you know, we don't spend our money on advertising. So we're all just really glad you're here and look forward to connecting with you again soon. So I wish you all a great weekend. Okay. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.